Joining us now to discuss the BTC price analysis and more is Juthica Chou. She's the head of OTC Options Trading at crypto exchange Kraken. Juthica, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Welcome to the Space Show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so it's interesting that we're seeing a correlation with BTC with both risk-on and risk-off assets. What's going on there?
Well, I think Bitcoin has always had elements of a currency, a commodity, a technology stock. And so we see all of those play out in this environment where, in theory, there's a favorable macro backdrop, especially with inflation concerns, with currency concerns. I think those lend themselves really well to Bitcoin as a long-term investment and store of value. But at the same time, it is a small-ish market cap. It trades like a tech stock, kind of like an equity investment. And so the correlation to NASDAQ is not too surprising. And then the last element is that everyone has sort of talked about this correlation. It becomes a little self-fulfilling in terms of, almost like technical analysis. If enough people are trading on it, then it starts to move in that manner. And so all of those come together with what I think has been a really interesting price action.
All right, and so I saw this analysis from Kraken Intelligence that September had a few losses, 3% over the month. And taking a look at October, it's seasonally supposed to be a positive month. What do you foresee in the short term for Bitcoin?
Well, we're seeing actually relative strength in Bitcoin as it compares to the broader market. So both in September and for the quarter overall, Bitcoin actually outperformed the S&P. And so I think depending on the price action, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see a bit of outperformance. Once we start hitting the 19 handle, I think we're seeing accumulation, folks who are comfortable getting in at that level, again, the favorable macro backdrop.
And how do you see the macroeconomic landscape impacting Bitcoin going forward? So there's a lot of talk about this Fed pivot, that they may be backing off this hawkish stance on interest rates. Where do you guys stand?
I think any substantial macro play, whether it's the pivot side or if something catastrophic happens on a macro point of view, anything large on a macro scale is probably going to have that kind of impact in a correlated manner for Bitcoin. So if there's something very bad, cash is king and Bitcoin's going to take the hit. If there's something very good, then in a risk-on environment, when people are thinking about how they want to allocate, Bitcoin will probably be a good proportion of that. So it'll move on anything big. On a smaller scale, though, if there's nothing really very volatile from a macro point of view, I think we'll continue to see small levels of accumulation of Bitcoin and outperformance at these levels.
And what about whale activity? We saw it was pretty flat throughout September. How is that going into October, in your thoughts, and how that might impact BTC's trajectory?
Well, so we continue to see on the OTC desk, we continue to see really strong institutional volume. In September, a lot of it was around catalyst-driven events, whether it was the ETH merge and Bitcoin ETH pair trading or just macro. But we continue to see now more yield-generating strategies as people are pretty comfortable with the fact that we're in a bear market, and so they're looking for ways to earn some return on their coins. But we still see institutions quite active. There's new ones coming in that are looking to start dabbling and dip their toes. And so we're still seeing healthy institutional flow in the OTC desk.
The other day, we also talked about how there was a rise in perpetuals with Bitcoin, and that could indicate, just general more speculation into Bitcoin. But whether or not that's a bearish or bullish sign, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think in general, historically, it's been more of a retail-driven signal and flow from retail, which has, I think, been bullish in terms of it's good to see retail back in the space. When there's bear markets or when there's a big sell-off from 3 Arrows, I think there was a concern that retail was kind of hurt, and are they still going to be active? So I think that's part of it. And then overall, with just the tightening of credit, we'll start to see more exposure in the derivatives market, I think, because that's where people can get probably more collateral efficiency and more margin trading than just in spot.
Going forward, do you see Bitcoin bottoming out? Are we at the bottom? What's the trading range?
Barring anything crazy on the macro side, we definitely do seem to be getting accumulation at the 18K, 19K level where institutions and even folks who have been in the space seem comfortable buying at those levels. And so I don't want to say it's a bottom per se, especially with the macro backdrop as it is, but I think that's where we're seeing institutions getting a little bit comfortable, starting to dip their toes back in again.
End of your forecast?
I wish I had a price forecast, but volatility is quite low right now, and so that sort of indicates it will probably be about around 20K for a little bit.